Now, this relates to Transformers because it's a piece of news that we thought in the long run was going to be something that connects with Transformers, and we talked about this when we went to HasCon and stuff, and the lack of presence of these brands and everything. And I think we should have known then that might have been a sign of what we're going to be discussing now, which
Hmm.
is it was recently announced that both Rom the Spaceknight and the Mask movies, which have been in discussion for quite a while, are now not going to be happening. And the main reason for this, according to different sources and stuff, is that they've been playing back and forth with the ideas of these movies for a while, but ultimately in the end, the water was just stirring around the drain, and they just decided not to go with it. The only thing that's really sad about it is that they said that if it does happen, it probably won't be with this same idea of a cinematic universe. It'll be different people.
Mm.
So it's not that it's just not happening right now, it's that it really is not happening, like in any way, shape, or form. And I mean the people that were tied to a lot of this writing credits and stuff were the guys from Spider-Man Homecoming and everything. Like it looked like they had a really good crew of people that Hasbro really gathered of writers to put some kind of movie together for both these franchises. And I guess their absence at HasCon all those months ago should have been the first sign that they're really not getting behind these brands. I don't know if it might have to do with comic book sales. Maybe
Hmm.
the ROM comics and the mass comics were not selling well, so they knew right away. I mean, and as funny as that sounds, oh, why would comic book sales affect everything? People don't realize that those Michael Bay movies, what really gave them that extra kick in the butt to even happen was because when those first Dreamwave comics came out from Pat Lee, they were the first time ever Transformers cracked. Not only they cracked the top 100 Diamond comic book sales listing, they were number one, and that made everybody raise an eyebrow. Where we were in an era where we were, right in the middle of X-Men movies and Spider-Man movies, and these Spider-Man and X-Men comics weren't cracking the top 100, and yet here's this Transformer comic that did. So it really brought huge attention, and of course, also it helped that Tom Hanks went on Jay Leno and sung the Transformer theme, solidifying its pop culture relevance, I guess, at a time when it really was only known to mecha fans and people who enjoyed Japanese anime and
Hmm.
again Beast Wars. Like it was Transformers was in a different place in the early 2000s than it was in the mid 2000s. Um, by the time all of that, so this is sad because I guess maybe those comic sales didn't do well. It reflected the interest wasn't there for those two brands, and maybe Hasbro just they saw how GI Joe couldn't get legs even with The Rock. They
Yeah.
they saw how their Battleship brand, even though we kind of knew that was dead in the water, no pun intended, from the get go. But we kind of knew that one was probably not going to do well.
I wonder
Hasbro,
what's happening with the Monopoly movie.
oh God,
I think Ridley Scott was supposed to be working on a Monopoly movie, and then probably the actual housing crisis happened, and everyone's like, we shouldn't probably touch this.
well, and it's kind of nuts because speaking of um, speaking of like movies based off of board games, because we have right now the Jumanji movie is out in theaters, and I don't know the overall numbers on that one,
Hmm.
but I mean that's yet another franchise that really is. Hey, let's take uh, a board game that was based off of a book, you know, and see what we could do with that. And I mean that first Jumanji movie with Robin Williams did fairly
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
And now we have, oddly enough, The Rock is in this one. I feel like
And
he's
I've
in it.
heard I've heard good things about it. A lot of people that have seen it have said it's actually really funny and it's a good, you know, good silly movie to watch. It's pretty funny.
Popcorn flick.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
popcorn flick. You won't be like, you just be like, oh, this is actually pretty funny and it moves along pretty briskly.
So it shows that, like, I guess Hasbro's getting cold feet with a lot of its other brands. We have a My Little Pony movie that I don't. did that come out?
The
That's a
My
good.
Little Pony movie, yeah, it did.
And did that? Let me look that up. Did that do well? Let me take
I
a.
don't know. I haven't heard anything or anybody talking about it. The
Let's see.
last news I have about Monopoly movie and works as Lionsgate teams with Hasbro. That's
See.
July 1st, 2015, and then October 28th, 2015, Monopoly movie Origins movie to explore game's anti-corporate inception.
Well, see, here's the thing. So the My Little Pony movie
Hmm.
domestically grossed only $21 million, but Hasbro refuses to give out the production budget.
Ooh, that's
So
bad.
yeah, so maybe that one didn't do well.
Probably.
So it's there's probably a combination of a lot of things. Look how the Gem movie didn't work
Well, I
out for
mean,
them.
well, I'm just thinking to myself, how late to the game are they with this My Little Pony movie? Like the big fervor of the whole bronies and everything like that was more
Oh yeah,
than
it was
a year or two ago. More than that.
they really came late to the game with that for sure. I
And it's
agree.
surprising because it's not even the Equestrian Girls that they were pushing more now.
It was
It's
the original ponies, yeah,
it's
which
the
is
original ponies.
what made
So,
them popular to begin with that group, with that audience. Again,
oh right,
it's
I did see pictures on my Facebook feed of people and dudes going to go see this movie. Like oh, check out this guy. Look, that kind of those kind of pictures. But I don't think all those guys are still. Well, most of those people aren't still around, I guess, or there's not enough of them anymore.
and what also was
Or
mentioned
maybe the internet is just that. Well, it feels like it's that loud when you actually look. It's just people talking through a bullhorn.
pretty much.
Sorry.
What also, no, it's okay. What also was mentioned too was they talked about the GI Joe franchise and where that's going in the future. From a movie standpoint and the film
Hmm.
standpoint, and it's going to be a reboot. They're thinking
Yeah.
brand new continuity, which I think is the wise thing to do. Personally, I think,
The the
and again,
gaps the gaps between the last two movies is too big.
it was too big.
Too
You
big,
can't.
and then if you're gonna continue the story right now with the current movie, it's again too big again.
The cast that they have at their disposal, and I've talked about this many times. Brand recognition. You can't, as much as you have The Rock and stuff, you can't go into that movie without your Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Jazz. You can't go with those key characters, the Megatrons, the Starscreams. It's the GI Joe equivalency of that. You can't
Yeah.
go into that without those characters. And then hope to build something from that,
Hmm.
and build an audience in the same way that the Bay movies did,
Yeah.
I mean, who was Ironhide in the Transformer universe in the past, let's say, 7 years or even 10 years, from Beast Wars up until the first Michael Bay movie, from 1997 to 2007, the name Ironhide was just a character name that was slapped onto toys that had nothing to do with the original G1 character.
Hmm.
But Lord knows when the Bay movies came out, they really reinvigorated that character and his own individual brand recognition
Yeah.
from his old, Toyota One van days and dying at the hands of Megatron in the '86 movie. So it's a shame, this news, because how it affects Transformers was there was hopes for, in the long run, a Hasbro Cinematic Universe. How that would work out, we were kind of being shown in bits and pieces through the IDW comics, specifically Rom and Transformers. So we kind of also were given an idea of how it would work out. And I thought with Rom, it actually looked like it would work out very well. Rom was a very good fit for it. Mask always, I felt, from a toy standpoint, works, but considering how different those universes are, I'd have to see it to believe it because it's
Hmm.
never been done before. Where, I mean, GI Joe, it's been done. I've always felt with GI Joe, it in the end it never really worked out amazingly. The
Yeah.
only really good book we've ever gotten of GI Joe versus Transformers, in my opinion, um, aside from the recent one that we got with Scaroli, which had really good art, but the story wasn't exactly something amazing. But I really liked kind of the art aesthetic and World War II style of the Dreamwave book that was done. I believe it was 2002 or 2001, which was okay, but again, nothing like amazing. Just a 4-issue miniseries that didn't really pan out that greatly in the end. It's a difficult thing to write. It's very difficult to write. I could understand it being. I can almost imagine what was going on in the writing room, where they probably were. They were not only
They had
writing.
all the toys in front of them.
Well, I imagine that
I
they.
would assume.
I imagine that the biggest issue they probably had was they weren't just writing those individual movies. They were, each one of these movies were being written with that after credit scene or that hole at the end of it to then tie it into Transformers or whatever.
Yeah, to flow it together.
In the same way, it's like you look at movies that in the end never did anything. Like look at the Super Mario Brother movie or the Street Fighter movie with Jean Claude Van Damme.
Oh yeah, yeah.
How those were written with an opening at the end for other stuff. In
Hmm.
the case of the Mario movie for a sequel, and the same thing with the Jean Claude Van Damme Street Fighter one with a sequel, where even the writer said, "Oh, we did all these things in the movie with the intent for when the second one will come out." So I'm pretty sure that these writers are probably like, okay, here's the entire Rom mythology, write a movie, and then oh, by the way, we want you to then tie it into this whole other franchise that has its own other
Yeah,
mythology.
exactly.
And it was probably, again, I would love to be a fly on the wall during those meetings, because I can only imagine, you know
Like
you
the
could.
the only way I could see them, well, if I was to do it myself, I would again steal from Transformers animated and be like, okay, let's say Megatron comes down, people reverse engineer his body, and then you get some of the mask stuff and Venom and Cobra kind of offshoots or something like that. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
some.
it's you're what pretty much you're saying is because Transformers Animated was pretty much looking at the plot of the first movie, where it
Mhm.
was like, oh, hey, Megatron when he was on ice, or in the
Yeah.
case of animated, Megatron when he was just a head in
Hmm.
in
Professor Sumdack's
in Professor Sumdack's
lab.
laboratory. Everything was being reversed engineered from those. In the same way, they're like, oh, we had Megatron all these years. Everything from the automobile to this has been reverse engineered from this NB01 Iceman,
Hmm.
whatever they called him,
Right.
in Sector 7. So it's the same thing. Like I could only imagine, like, yeah, that's one way that they could do. They could write a story where it's like, hey, remember the time in between, when they found Megatron and Sector 7 in movie 1, oh, there was this, terrorist organization that worked on the inside and stole information and then
Yeah,
created.
exactly. You know what
Yeah,
I
there's
mean? Like,
there's so many ways that, yeah, and it could totally be written like that. Lord knows every other single Michael Bay movie up to this point has had one of those things where, hey, did you know that this happened between this time and this time? Since I think every single movie has done that thus far, where it's like, oh, there's something else that happened before the movie this time. I think,
yeah,
yeah, every movie has done that.
that's how they all start off.
Yeah.
What
So
you knew
it
about
would.
what you knew about X was wrong. It was
Yeah.
really this.
Yeah. So
Dun-dun-dun.
it'll be the same thing more or less, but at least it would be, at least this time the emphasis on human characters would be just because those human characters were the primary toys of the series.
But it,
S-
but I like even though with that said, it seems like GI Joe and I think their Micronauts movies will go on as planned. Like even
Mike
though Mask and Rom are like they're like you know what we can't really figure this out. They're still going with these two other ones, GI Joe and Micronauts.
Micronauts, I feel the reason why it still has legs is because the Micro Man franchise in Japan has been going strong just as long as Transformers.
Mm.
It's like it's been consistently nonstop putting out product forever. So something that even if it fails to get legs here, Japan is still going to do their own thing. So I'm pretty sure Japan on their side of things is still going like, "Hey, we still want this to happen even if you don't want to do it." Where
Hmm.
Japan doesn't have a tie to Rom the Spaceknight,
Right.
A Parker Brothers action figure, robot that got no release over there, or combined with the fact, same thing, Mask. I think Mask maybe got some toys imported, but in general, was not a thing over there.
Like
So
I thought they would have tried to meld Mask and GI Joe together.
that's what they tried to do in the past. They tried to do that in the past. Matt Tracker had a GI Joe figure that was part of the 25th anniversary line back
Like
then.
they would be like a subdivision or another sect or
That was
something, and
that
then they
was
and then they tied the two together because they realized the threat's too big and taking
Ev-
it on individually is not good enough.
every single mask collector and fan always thought that would be the easiest way to introduce mask to the mass audiences, is just to
Hmm.
integrate them into GI Joe, or alternatively, a lot of GI Joe fans wanting to have GI Joe at least exist and be successful on television,
Hmm.
to kind of go that mask route in order to get the appeal of children today, that in a very fickle toy market. I
Yeah.
mean, we're going long-winded on this, but it's just right now as it stands, those two brands are dead in the water. And even if there is going to be any kind of interest for movies, they're probably not going to be done through the same circles for the cinematic universe. So as it stands right now, the cinematic universe is dead.
R.I.P.